Living alone, think of all the friends I've known. When I die, the telephone, nobody's home. All by myself, don't wanna be all by myself anymore.
Hi and welcome. Today I want to talk about loneliness and navigating being alone. If you feel lonely or have felt alone, I encourage you to listen to this video, as I believe it will transform the way you view loneliness and view being alone. Of course, I'm doing this from my own experience and perspective, but I truly believe you gain insight into your own loneliness or feelings of being alone. That is, if you feel alone or if you experience loneliness. And what I'm hoping is that by the end of this video, you will have more curiosity on what it means to be lonely or alone, and that you will have more reflective awareness and know the best way to move forward with your own loneliness, with your own situation. Just so you know, I'll be using the terms lonely, loneliness, and being alone interchangeably. And if you're new to my channel, can I just give you a grand welcome? I'm Fatima. I'm a life coach. I'm also an RN, and this is Undefined Life. So grab yourself a cup of tea, because I like tea. Let's get talking, shall we? Right?
Let's go.
Now, I would probably say the last 5 years since 2020 have been like a major lesson in understanding being alone. For me, reflectively, it is actually probably the last 6 years that have been a major lesson on loneliness and on being alone. Loneliness was not something I was comfortable with. And I don't think anyone is comfortable with being lonely. Even introverted people, I think if they are lonely, I think they would struggle. I mean, that's my opinion. I don't know. If you're an introvert, comment, do you prefer loneliness? I don't know. You know, being an RN, I have met people who like to be alone, not lonely. Because loneliness, I think, is a state and it could be spiritual. I don't know. Comment below what you think. Whether you think loneliness is a bigger state of something or it's just a feeling. I don't know. You tell me. Back to the topic, loneliness was not something I was comfortable with because I grew up in an African culture, which is very communal and collectivist in general. Although being in the diaspora, this is changing a lot. Hence, I think that's why we're having this discussion. And I was also like Miss Busybody. I even laugh at that because I could never not be doing something. Just note, never not be doing something.
To me, I be work.
And I say that because it was so unconscious that I was constantly busy. Now picture this. I was the type of person who did a lot of extra shifts on top of my 37.5 hour working week. If I was not at work, I was either at church or doing something with church people, particularly between the years of like 2013 and 2023. So that's like 10 years of me working and doing extra shifts on top of my work and still being very active in church. Very busy life, I must say. And before church life, so this is sort of before 2013 when I had an active decision to be so deeply devout in my Christianity. I remember if I was not working, I was always busy with a friend or with my partner. And I think what I'm trying to say is that I was always seeking for something to do or seeking to occupy myself, that I just never felt lonely. And this point is important for when I get into what I actually learned from loneliness, because obviously I did become lonely at some point. So it is important. So growing up in Africa, well, the time I grew up anyway, you were never really alone, or should I say hardly ever alone. There was always someone to talk to. And do you know, in Africa, even your neighbors are your friends. So you don't really face loneliness. You could be simply taking a walk and you meet a stranger on the streets, and it is common for them to greet you and exchange a few pleasantries. removing any feeling of isolation or loneliness. Now, fast forward to living in the UK was such a shock for me until I got used to it that when people greet me now, it feels like a violation of privacy. Can you imagine? Someone says hi to me on a street that doesn't even belong to me, and I feel like they're violating my privacy. What a contrast. But as the years progressed, so from 2020, my life actually took a drastic 180-degree turn. It was like a turn up. I became a mum. It was the pandemic. And I found myself in a situation where I was actually having to be on my own without people to visit me, people to call me, people to do things with. And if I'm being honest, that was the most difficult thing to experience. I mean, it is well known that most mums, well, I say well known, but it's not well known. But one of the biggest things that happen to new mums, especially in the Western world, is they face a lot of loneliness and isolation. But despite me becoming a mum and the pandemic lockdown, there were also other factors that contributed to me becoming lonely. Because if you think about it, 6 years is a long time to experience loneliness. A long time. I will do a separate video on one of the isolating factors, as that is a whole nother story which deserves its own special video. I'm not going to get into this video. But if you want to know, comment in the comment section and I will get the time to do one. Now, one of the most uncomfortable feelings I had to face when I started to experience loneliness was this deep emotional pain. I remember I was feeling rejected, I felt abandoned. Plus, also, there was this fear of being alone. Well, at that time, I didn't know that what I feared was being alone. It was so scary as I had thoughts like, how will I manage this? And in hindsight, I think what I felt was a lack of control. As I had a young baby, it was the lockdown, and everyone was isolating. Well, we were in quarantine. Plus, I had a situation that isolated me from others, which I was saying it will have to be a whole different video. I get it when they say loneliness can lead to death, as when you feel lonely, it feels empty, like you are in an endless void. Somehow it feels like there's some kind of loss. Well, that's how I felt anyway. In a previous video, I did mention how the void goes into the realm of the spirit. I'll put the link up there for you to see. And I do recommend listening to that too, as this is explaining the void from a very different angle. But I just believe that the void is calling you into spirit. Loneliness made a way for me to experience feelings and emotions I had probably avoided experiencing before by keeping myself busy and active. But this time, I could not mask the feeling of loneliness. I couldn't run away from it either. It's like I had to face it. I was at home on maternity leave. It was locked down. We were all quarantining, as I said before. And experiencing loneliness sort of forced me to sit and examine a lot of things in my life. I started to ask myself like really difficult questions. I was like, why is it that as much as I pray and I request God to give me friends or people to surround me, it is not happening? Because at that time, you can imagine my prayers were all like, God, give me mum friends. God, give me this and that. But still, I remained lonely. I panicked internally as to why I was not receiving these answers to my prayers. Why are friends not coming to me? Why are you ignoring me, God? Why is God ignoring me? What wrong have I done? Am I being punished by God? All these thoughts entered my mind. I really was like trying to find the fault in me as to why I was experiencing this situation. Now, the biggest paradox or the biggest irony, we could say, was that this circumstance of having to pray to have friends and me begging God for friends was so new to me. I'm ambivert, so I'm able to socialize easily. And throughout my childhood and early adulthood, Friends were easily attainable for me, and I never had to make effort to make friends in the past. In fact, people used to want to be my friend. And I've had instances where people came to tell me, God told me to befriend you. Or randomly, people would tell me, I want to be your friend. And I remember a pastor telling me I'm supposed to be close friends with particular people in church. And it actually brought us closer to becoming friends. And suddenly, all this vanished. Gone. Poof. It was just so odd. Now I can make sense of it in hindsight, but at that time, it never made sense. So you can imagine I fought this so hard.
Don't wanna be all by myself.
Perhaps I was in spiritual warfare until I started asking the right questions. Could it be a symptom of becoming older? As I was getting into my 40s, I was asking myself, and I was coming into sort of like part acceptance, while part of me was still resisting and fighting this loneliness. And I noticed a shift that somehow part acceptance and not blaming myself or God as the cause is sort of when I started to shift out of the pain, the discomfort of loneliness. And I say this in hindsight as I was not aware of this at the time. I didn't notice it at first until I began to notice how being on my own didn't sting so much. The resultant emotional aches and pains from loneliness also reduced. And as this was happening, it was also the time I was starting to see that the loneliness was actually teaching me some things. My eyes and my heart opened to receiving lessons. Well, I was open to whatever was happening. At that time, I didn't know I was receiving a lesson or lessons. It began with things about me first that I was learning, that I was discovering. And I think most life lessons are actually for you first, for us first, and then about our life with others second. And I think it's because we have to learn our own lessons. I'm going to use a few words that describe the different phases that I went through. You could call it stages or seasons of loneliness. It's up to you. Choose the most resonant word. And I think for me, it's phases that's more resonant. And I only realized this year in 2025, I truly reflected on how I used to feel so sad, so unhappy and upset about being lonely and alone that, wow, these are the phases that I went through. So there was the loneliness phase, which is the one I've just been describing with all the difficult emotions, the resistance to loneliness, being alone and suffering really. Then there was the alone phase. And this is where I was starting to accept my circumstances or my loneliness. I was beginning to feel the feelings and the emotions without avoidance. And I no longer saw myself as a victim to loneliness. Believe me, loneliness and alone phase are completely different. Then came the solitary phase where I accepted being alone and I started to step into my own personal power. I didn't know it at the time, but now I recognize that my own power was coming up. How this showed up, it was the way I felt was no longer dictated by people being around me being around people. I was still alone, but my mindset was beginning to shift or had shifted. It's like, the cliche phrase is from pain to power, pain to transformation, pain to purpose, or transformation. This is what I'm trying to say. And this involved alchemizing the difficult feelings and emotions. Now, the final two phases, I will explain these further coming up in this recording. So stay listening up. There's the hermit stage and the solitude phase. Now, I used to be purely extroverted, but now I am more ambivert. And this transformation took shape during phase 1 and phase 3 of my loneliness experience. I will discuss this later and what this looked like for me, and hopefully you can pick up one or two nuggets for yourself. Now, what were the lessons? What were the lessons? I think this is crucially important and part of why I'm even doing this video. I didn't realize that because of the way I'd grown up in community, I functioned well by being a people pleaser because A, it made me safe, and B, it made me important to the community. I was so enmeshed that there was no separation between me and what my family, my culture, my religious conditioning, or society said. And when I look back, my life goals were only in alignment to cultural and family expectations or religious expectations. I never really thought for myself or thought of myself. And if I did think for myself, it was something that I knew already was going to be a tick with my family, my culture, or my religion. In fact, now when I think about it, I laugh. I believed it was wrong to consider yourself, that I discussed most things with someone in the family or an older church leader, as their approval meant everything to me. The state of loneliness I experienced got me into a place where I had to sit, I had to think and make some independent decisions for myself. I had to start choosing for myself. And it was the first time I seriously considered this question: Fatima, what do you want out of life? I actually pondered it as opposed to what does my family, what does my religious leader or religious community or another third party authority in my life want? In came in questions such as, who are you? What is it that you want? Where are you going? What do you want your life to look like in the next 5, 10, or 15 years? And these were questions I posed to me, asking me. I remember I was writing them in my journal. Very powerful, cathartic, but also very powerful. I also reflected back, looking at what I wanted out of life in the last 10 years, 15 years, sort of the things I wanted, and how many of those things that I wanted were actually accomplished. Now, this was a very revelatory experience as I began to see that a lot of the things that I wanted or supposedly wanted were based on what other people wanted for me. Shockingly, at the time, I noticed that most of those things did not work or they were not fulfilling for me. Like I was actually living a life that I didn't want, but what other people wanted from me. One discovery I made out of all this, and this is not a discovery I made at that time, but over the time, I have actually seen that the energy you have over someone else's desire for you differs to that embodied energy that you have over a desire that comes from your heart and is truly aligned to you. In other words, you will always have greater passion for what you truly want. And that was a good lesson. So my passion is birthed from what I truly want. And why is it a good lesson? Because when you approach life from a place where you actually desire something and are intentional, I'll give you an example. So let's say you say, this is where I want to be in 5 years' time. There's a different energy that you put in your pursuit to your dreams, your goals, or desires. And even when you acquire them, it's completely different energy. And I want to demonstrate this. Now, feel the different energies in these two statements that I'm going to give you. So you could ask someone, why are you doing this? And they go, actually, my mom or my dad wanted me to do this, but it's not really what I wanted to do. But I'm here. To, I'm so grateful for this opportunity as I have always dreamed of and I've always wanted to do this. And I'm so excited to be part of this. Such different energies. And it sounds so vibrationally different, right? How we approach, nurture, and preserve what we want totally differs when it is imposed on us or we feel obligated to it. And I think that was one of the biggest lessons that I learned through my loneliness phase, because a lot of the things that I pursued, a lot of the friendships that I pursued, a lot of the relationships that I pursued, they were not necessarily things that I wanted, but I felt like, oh, this was what fits in with my community, fits in with the people around me, fits into a supposed life that I wanted. Up to now, I'm still asking myself, is that why some of it is no longer there? Is that why it vanished? Who knows? I'm still discovering, but I'm curious to it. But I can tell you this, that loneliness set me up into a process of self discovery. I explored what my values and principles were. Questions such as, are my values mine? Or did somebody else give me those values? Or something else? Are they my principles or somebody gave them to me as principles? This helped cement this new identity that was developing in the solitary phase. And in becoming this new version of me, I went from being a pure extrovert, or so I thought, to now an ambivert. And to my surprise, I really became comfortable and enjoy being alone, being in my own space and in my own company. And also, I began to recognize the times that I also want to be with others in the company of other people. Yeah, that was a great discovery for sure. Now, enter the hermit phase. I began embracing myself unapologetically, and I became aware to differentiate who I am at each present moment from how I grew up and who I was brought up to be. And a benefit to this phase was an understanding that I and others have a right to have different opinions and values, and that I could be myself. It was very liberating for me. It was liberating because I was so afraid of not fitting in, of being rejected and being judged by my community. But I had now began to accept myself, knowing that there is a possibility that, yes, I may be shunned for becoming different, but yet I'm still okay to become who I've become. It's like it stopped me fearing how other people are with me. And I can only tell you, but this has been such a life-changing, positive byproduct of me experiencing loneliness and being alone. And this is why I even came back to YouTube. I used to be on YouTube, but because I was one of those people who just worried too much about other people, I just couldn't function on YouTube. But now I'm like, you know what? There's somebody who resonates with what I'm talking about. And those who don't, it's okay. It changed how I view fitting in, how I view being accepted, how I view um, rejection and things like that. And honestly, it's done so much for me. Like, oh my goodness, who knew loneliness can teach you self acceptance? You know? But for me, it did. What was initially so scary and would give me anxiety became very liberating, very freeing. I did not know this at the time, of course, but the way God and the universe put me at an empath, there was no way out. And the cycle of loneliness continued until I began unraveling the lessons. It's funny that when I became accepting that it's okay to be alone, and I haven't caused this, that I'm whole and not broken, but it is a life phase. That's when I actually learned the true art of self love. As usual, my lessons come with questions to myself, or I could say came with questions. I was asking myself, because I haven't got friends and people around me, I questioned if I was still lovable. Am I still loved? I'm no longer surrounded by people, so does this mean I'm unworthy? And I would be asking myself what I needed to do to feel worthy and alive while feeling alone. Am I a beautiful person? I was really questioning my character. Am I a good soul, even though there's no people around me and there's no one celebrating me? I have no one clapping for me. I was sort of questioning or trying to see how I could be validated when there's no one to validate me. I had no one affirming me, especially in my new mum phase either. Being a mum is not always straightforward. Motherhood has its own challenges. I have 2 videos where I talk about the challenges of motherhood and supposed fulfillment that comes with motherhood. And I talk about you can only be happy when you're really happy. It's not about just becoming a mother, because when I became a mother, I was not in a good place. I'm not going to lie. I was in a very difficult place. And I went deeper into a more difficult place. So there was a lot that needed to be transformed in me for motherhood to fulfill me and make me happy. And I'll link up those two videos up here or up there if you're interested. Part of me wanted to know what will become of me. Will I always be alone and feel lonely? Will I have no one and just have a child? And I remember feeling so low and unwanted during this phase that when I walked out the door, I felt naked. I felt like strangers could see my loneliness and my feelings of worthlessness. It was just such a difficult time. But I did a lot of plenty of self reflection as time went by and questioned some of my negative thoughts. And I began to realize that the person I grew up being, the social butterfly who attracted many friends and was an amazing friend, is still me. I was still the same person. My life circumstances were different, but I was still the same person. Even just saying that is so beautiful. And I recognized, which at that time I wasn't seeing, that I have some friends who still remain in my friendship circle. We've been friends for years and we still get on, you know? And this was so healing for me, so much that I opened up to even more surprises. And I remember I started to notice that when I was walking on the street, there were certain people that I always saw started to greet me to say hi. And I started to greet them back. And I was like, wow, something is shifting in me. Something is changing in me. Like maybe I've now got this friendly demeanor around me as opposed to when I felt lonely and unwanted. So I believe it all happens on an energetic, spiritual level. That's my opinion. But I don't know what you guys think. I would love to know your comments. So gradually, with all the changes taking place over the phases that I went through and to where I am now, I am mixing with more new people, but my relationship to dependency on people or people dependency has changed. I am connected, but I can detach and still feel whole in myself. It's almost like once I'm not talking to a friend or once I don't have a certain relationship in my life, I don't cry, woe is me, I'm unwanted, I'm rejected, I'm abandoned. I do feel like the sadness, like, wow, but I don't stay too attached to it. I just take it as in people come, people leave, and that's just life. I'm able to make friends for the moment. But I also understand that it doesn't have to go further to us becoming like besties for it to even mean something. It does not have to go further for it to mean something about me or about them, you know? Yeah, there's an acceptance about that. And I don't see myself as somebody who is not whole. So I just think when people are coming into my life, they're just adding to who I already am. It's not like I'm lacking something that I need certain people because I'm incomplete. That feeling has completely gone. If you've been watching my channel for a long time, I guess you already know that I do love uplifting humanity and uplifting others. I think that's just what I am. I like to encourage, I like to give hope. Doesn't mean sugarcoat things, but I come as somebody who likes to bring out the life in you when you feel lifeless. I began to recognize that I was also experiencing these nostalgic memories of what friendships looked like for me when I was in school. But a truth and a fact is that my life and my reality had changed. That was something that I had to sort of accept. So, not to live in nostalgia or in past memories. I'm not in school anymore. And I have an acceptance that I cannot recreate those relationships that I experienced growing up in Zimbabwe because my life is different now. Those friendships were before the internet even existed, and that says something. And there's certain things that were culturally or socially what we grew up with, so I didn't have to explain myself. Hence, it was just easy to make those friends. Yes, those were beautiful friendships. They gave me a good foundation and showed me how loving relationships and friendships look like. even the way people responded to me, by the way those friends responded to me. But I've since stopped trying to recreate past friendships as I recognize that I'm being invited to create something new in the environment that I'm in. I'm not seeking the past as I've come to an acceptance that I'm okay where I am. And this is also the story of migration. Unfortunately or fortunately, whichever way you want to look at it, as when we migrate, it changes our lives. Everything about us changes. It's almost like the life we knew, the life we lived is no longer the life that we live. So part of me accepting my new normal was accepting that, look, this is my life now. And interestingly, it also helped me stop being so lonely. And besides, I can always go to Zimbabwe if I want to. And now comes the solitude phase. This is the phase where I am now. And in this phase of life, this solitude phase of my life, I am learning to nurture and I'm learning to love the circle that God gave me. And this circle contains family members and new people. And there's a core circle, which is my family members, which is not changing. But the other outer circle evolves like an ebb and flow, like a tide. There's a coming and a going. Some people sort of stay while the peripheries changes, you know, but I know what my sort of my inner circle looks like. And who knows, it could change. Can you imagine if I was living in a place, in a country where I didn't have family? Perhaps I would have to develop a new circle of people that I trust. And part of this learning is not to seek out what's not there, but to be authentic with myself and what is present. And I say this because I was one of those people who created fantasies of what a perfect relationship or perfect family or a perfect friendship should look like. A perfect friendship now looks to me like enjoying another person's company with some reciprocity, of course, because that's important. Otherwise, that's not a friendship. It's just a one-sided thing. So I get to enjoy this without looking for perfection, but more realness, seeking something that's energetically sort of brings us together. One of the things I'm learning through the law of attraction is that to even create the relationships that I want in others, I have to be intentional and in alignment with my thoughts and mindsets about the type of friendships, about the type of relationships that I want. As your thoughts, your beliefs, they all play a big part in what comes into our lives. And I find that when you're in lack, you start to create what causes you to lack more. You have to really enter like an abundance mindset whereby you freely start to receive those things that you're seeking. Friendships and relationships never come as a full package. They're created by the people in them. That's another thing that I learned. When I was in Zimbabwe, there's certain things that I took for granted because we are all sort of like grown up in the same culture, same way of doing life. But now I find that I have to be so intentional about creating friendships and just keeping people in my life. Even with family, we have to be intentional for our relationships to thrive, for us not to be alone. It has to be intentional. In this solitude phase, I'm learning that self love also expresses itself in how we love others, in how we love parts of ourselves that we struggle with. I had to learn to love myself while alone, with no one giving me outward love. I had to learn to love myself in that loneliness and not judge myself for being lonely, which was such a game changing attitude. And by that, I mean to stop blaming myself for things. And with that self love, with that true authenticity within, I found myself at a place where I had to be truly honest that some of my past relationships and friendships had to dissolve and end. They were past their sell by date. I was just keeping certain people in my life who we were not even the same. We were not even thinking the same. But I probably kept those people in my life because I didn't want to be alone. I worked so hard for certain friendships, and no wonder they didn't last. I came to that revelation through my loneliness phase. How did I let them go? I wasn't going to go out there and erupt like a volcano and go, you did this to me. You were such a bad friend. Or you left me. I was isolated. I was lonely. No, I didn't do that. That's not what I was going to do. With the newfound peace in my life and enjoying the solitude, I mostly allowed an amicable letting go process to occur, which means I just let the friendships die a natural death. That this doesn't mean that I'm not willing to talk to these people again. No, they're now just acquaintances. When we talk, but I'm not seeking more because I'm happy with who I am and where I am. And where am I now? Well, it is 2025 and I've got quite a few acquaintances, people that I talk to, people I laugh with, people I joke with. Do I desire something deeper? Yeah, I do, as I do miss having some deep connections to others. Even though I do have it with one or two people, I still think I miss the deep, unspoken connections that existed in the past before the internet. There was a powerful way we connected as souls before technology was involved. And I think I do miss that. Yeah, I do. I do miss relationships that were just pure humanness without technology. So I do have close friends, but even that's changed. I speak to them, but I'm not dependent on them from that needy, codependent place where they have to be there to fulfill me or make me feel secure and complete. I am in a more secure spiritual place. And this has been very transformational. What do I mean by that? I have a spiritual awareness to who, where, and what is happening in my life. Somehow I see my life as in a lot of the things are all connected to this one big divine purpose. What is this big one divine purpose? Well, as I see it, I've got more wisdom now, especially when it comes to loneliness, to myself, to my life, to navigating relationships. There's more growth, there's more expansion in me. I transmuted loneliness to being okay being alone. Yeah, I nurture what I have now. I'm now surrendered to trusting God's divine plan and trusting the abundant universe, as I've also realized that there's just some things that are about divine timing. As much as we have free will, I talk about free will quite a lot because I don't believe that we should violate anybody's free will, because then we are violating them, we are violating their soul, we are violating their life purpose on earth. But I do recognize that there are certain universal, divinely orchestrated alignments that are also taking place for us to take shape. So certain things are just happening. And, it's like they cause certain things to happen in our lives for us to go into certain lessons or into a certain path, even though there's things like timelines. But that's not for this video. I can only think of that scripture in the Bible that says, do not awaken love before its time. And now that scripture profoundly makes more allegoric sense to me. And I think it's a wise statement. I think you can apply it to anything. Do not awaken something before its time in your life. Do not awaken love before its time. You could be wanting love so much that you end up attracting the wrong partner or the wrong people into your life, all because you want love, or because you don't want to be lonely or you don't want to be alone. And I think the wisdom there is that you should continue to love yourself, embrace where you are, and believe that at the right time you'll be presented with love from others or another. It's also important to believe that why would God or the universe want to cause you to suffer and punish you by keeping something that's vital for your well-being? Do you know, I believe that I'll be presented with divine, beautiful friendships that are aligned with me, especially where I am now, who I am and where I'm going in life at the appointed divine time. I know that the person that I used to be 6 years ago is so different that some of the friends I attracted 6 years ago, I know that I wouldn't attract them now. Doesn't mean they wouldn't be my acquaintances, but I don't think they would be my inner circle, put it that way. I hope this video touches you, touches someone. especially if you're going through a season of loneliness or a lonely phase in your life and you're trying to make sense of why is this happening to me. I just want to say I feel you. I understand the sadness and the emptiness that can come with loneliness and being alone because I was there for 6 freaking years and that's not easy. I know there are people who are also in relationships where they feel quite lonely. And I hope you take some lessons from this video. I urge you all to, instead of thinking what's wrong outside or how could this be met outside, I encourage you to go within because within is where you can only unravel the answers that you need. The answers are for you first. I also encourage you that when you do need people, to get out and actively seek people and places where you can meet people. I had to start doing that. And even now, I often do that by going to a coffee shop and talking to people. You know, I find in coffee shops, sometimes people are just friendly. They'll be like, hi, nice day. It reminds me of growing up. And I'm just matching that same energy that I had back then to now. Like, it's okay. At least somebody actually saw me and said, hi. Look, as much as I'm not seeking validation from people, but I have to appreciate when a stranger greets me and sees me because that's beautiful, right? Can't deny that. And I also came to a place of actually realizing that I've got my family who I visit often. I think one of the biggest realizations for me, and I say for me, is that if you've got a good close family, because I appreciate not everybody has a good close family, they will be there for you no matter what. So instead of me saying I need to find certain things in certain people outside me, I already had my family. And I think by that, I learned not to have certain expectations for my family that are not fair, such as expecting them to soothe my feelings of loneliness, because those were my things that I had to deal with. I started to go to my family because I loved them. It was recognizing that I loved them and I love being with them, that I appreciate them and I'm thankful that I have them in my life. And truly, as much as I felt alone or lonely, I wasn't really alone. By doing that, I started to recognize that when I'm around them, somehow there was such nourishment because I started to go with that attitude of me wanting to be with them. I don't even think it's to do with them. I think because I changed, something in me shifted. I was bringing that energy to them and I was starting to receive it back. Of course, remember I said as long as your family is not toxic, because sometimes it's very difficult to bring an energy into an atmosphere that's already very heavy and very difficult. And I appreciate that. So I'm not saying that this is a one size fits all for everyone. But if you've got a good family and you feel lonely, I would say start questioning how maybe things could be different with you and them. I actually recognize that one of my values or one of my core needs is feeling a sense of belonging. By being with my family, there was this wholeness, this belonging that I started to feel. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. I do belong. Just acknowledging and sitting in those positive feelings for me created like a beautiful sense of safety. I think it started to ward off those feelings of being alone. And when the creepy thoughts that say you are lonely were coming in, especially at that time that I felt lonely as I was going through the phases. So it's almost like there was something else energetically counterbalancing what needed to be alchemized, the pain of loneliness into acceptance and belonging. I will say that when I really needed my mindset to shift, I came across the law of attraction. I didn't even search for it. The information started to come to me. The law of attraction really influenced me in understanding how this law is in everything, including my relationships, my relationship to myself, my relationship with others, and even understanding spirituality in a way that I'd never seen it before. These are the things that I've not really talked about on my channel. But if you're following me, it would be nice if you put a comment if you want me to do a video on what I mean by that. Because I think it's important to explain a little bit of what that means or what law of attraction is, even though I know there's a lot of woo stuff. For me, it's just the practicalness of as a man thinks, so is he. Really simple. Let me know what you think about this video. And if you're watching this video, I'm Fatima. I'm a life coach and I focus on confidence coaching for women to be confident in who they are, to be confident in pursuing your goals and dreams, and for you to find confidence in your unique voice or in your self-expression. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope you have gained from the things I've talked about with regards to loneliness and being alone. If you are struggling with being lonely and it's taking its toll on you, one of the things I do advise is do seek help from a healthcare professional or seek therapy, because sometimes maybe there's things that you need to talk about. And I say this because there were times I felt lonely as a child that came up when I was dealing with my stages of going through loneliness to where I am now in solitude, where I had to sort of like soothe the little child in me that felt lonely and meet her needs, especially now as I'm an adult. But I could do that for myself because there's certain things that I've learned as a coach that I could do. But for you, I would encourage you to seek therapy if it's something you're struggling with. Sometimes there could be deeper issues that are unexplored. But thank you so much for watching. And I encourage you to like and subscribe to my channel so that we can become YouTube friends, because I think we'll be really good YouTube friends. Take care and bye.